All right, let's bring you to the newspapers this morning. Plenty to get to and plenty of discussion points there from the couple of videos that we've just been showing you. I'm going to start with the Irish Daily Mail. Hail, rain and show big heart. This is Ballyhale. Hail, rain and snow. Hail, rain and show. You get it? Taking a little while this morning?
I got it, Ger.
Yeah, I didn't get it.
Yeah.
It's you again. Ericsson can derail Ireland's Euro bid, McCarthy warns. A lot of positivity around the draw. It's like, oh, it's Denmark. I mean, they're not that good. They only beat us 5-1 that one time. Every other time it's been a 0-0 draw.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to one of those 5-1s or 0-0s.
I think the narrative is more based on our historical kind of reference point with Switzerland and Denmark than actually how good they are. Switzerland would be a lot better than us, but Denmark are very much a one-man team. They really are. Like, if we can curtail Ericsson, and in fairness to Mick McCarthy, he's in his role with Ireland before, we competed against superior teams by kind of maybe bringing them down to our level a bit, but that's not a bad group. Georgia's probably I think Georgia's probably the worst of the draw in terms of the pool situation, because they are a good side but they're the fourth tier in it. We're going to have to play in Tbilisi. If you remember, when we played them last in Tbilisi, we couldn't beat them. We were very lucky to play them in Germany the time before, which I think was Trapp's first game.
Yeah. We beat them 2-0, did we?
Beat them. I think it was 2-1. I think they might have got a consolation goal. Glenn Whelan got an absolute fluke of a goal, and I'll always remember that game because I booked to go to Georgia, and it was my first ever Ireland away game to book to actually see, and I wanted to go somewhere quite different. And then a war broke out and they moved the game to Germany.
Yeah.
And I booked my flights, so I ended up going to Georgia. And
What's the Georgian national anthem like, Johnny?
They've changed it actually since. But
so you don't know the new one?
No, I don't. But I might go to Georgia next year. It's a really interesting place. And their new coach, they've really gotten behind the team. So I think they're like 50,000 at a game against Kazakhstan lately in the Nations League, which they won their pool in. So they're doing really well, and that's not going to be like, I remember being on Lansdowne Road for the game against them in the last qualifiers, where we basically were poor against them and very, very lucky to beat them.
Is that the game we got hammered and Seamus Coleman scores the
winner? Yeah, absolute fluke of a goal. We kind of like smuggled the ball over the line via the kind of the goal line. Just one of these really fluky goals, but it gives us a chance, sure. Like at the same time, it gives us a chance. We're definitely good enough to get results against all those teams.
Yeah, we could also draw with all of them. You can
Except
see
Gibraltar.
I don't know. I can see a situation where, like, we played Gibraltar. So we played them the last time. We were just looking up this before we came on, and it was somewhere in the Algarve. It might even have been Faro, I'm not sure. Which is obviously the best away trip if you just want a few days sunshine. Whatever
it's pretty
time
boring
of the year.
though, isn't it?
No, it's
great. Do you
great.
not want to go somewhere cultural like?
I mean,
the Algarve?
Well, it depends. We're at different stages in our life, Johnny.
Yeah.
Like,
would you go to the Algarve or Tbilisi?
I mean, I've got kids.
Algarve or Tbilisi?
Yeah, think about it. I mean, think about what normal people would answer to that, Johnny.
I don't know. I'm going to book Tbilisi. Hopefully the game will take place there.
That sounds like it could be a good trip. All right. So on to the Irish Times this morning. McCarthy optimistic about Ireland's hope is the story that Emmett Malone has there. So, I mean, obviously Mick McCarthy's going to be pretty happy. There was a picture of Robbie Keane who could barely suppress his joy. I mean, obviously he was happy at some point during the draw, but it looked kind of like he was celebrating, which obviously I don't think he was.
No.
Not that much. Cullen Wary of former Leinster star Dempsey's input to Bath think tank. This is Leinster talking up Bath ahead of the Heineken Cup this weekend. And then a great picture. Pickford apologises to Everton fans for freak goal. So you heard a bit of the post-match reaction there from Kevin Caban and Seamus Coleman, and there's a picture of Divock Origi looking up at the crossbar and wondering, is this ball really going to drop for me so I can score it? It's kind of like referring to this goal as the Divock Origi goal. It's kind of like referring to William Gallas's goal against France as the William Gallas goal, as opposed to the Thierry Henry handball. Yeah.
Ken Early has a good article there about, I think what without having read the article, I got the gist of what he was saying was that Manchester City, they're giving the illusion that there's a title race when there isn't a title race, and one slip up is basically fatal. And I think he was probably referencing Liverpool yesterday, and I was kind of saying this yesterday to my mates. I was like, Liverpool kind of have to win this game. I mean, there's really, you just can't slip behind them. And if they do win the league, and things can change, they look back on, that was the most freakish goal. Not only the way Pickford, obviously, he did make a mistake. I mean, these things happen. But also, Van Dijk's strike of the ball up in the air was one of these, like, it was like one of these things one of the annoying lads in the playground would do. Like, instead of playing football, he just kicks the ball up and he's an asshole. Like,
yeah.
Van Dijk, it was just one of these really strange, and somehow it hits the bar, comes back down,
rolls
and there's
across
Origi. It was just such a bizarre goal, and you're like, is this written in the stars for Liverpool? and the place went absolutely nuts, including Klopp, obviously. And I was talking about this as well. They're playing Napoli, Tuesday week, and I, funnily enough, think if Liverpool get knocked out of the Champions League,
I was making this case last week.
They'd be like, it's grand.
I was making this case with Dan.
Want to win the league, yeah.
But and if you're in the Europa League, you just go, right, no thanks, and you put out your under 21 team or whatever.
Yeah.
He's like, no, you got to try and win the Europa League. Klopp hasn't won a trophy yet. But like, do Liverpool fans really care about winning the trophy, or do they care about actually being competitive in the league?
They want to win the league, I think, certainly at the behest of everything else. At this stage, it's just been a bit like maybe the Galway Hurlers, Limerick hurling fans. They just wanted to win that after all this time. And the Champions League, they've done that. It does look very difficult, though. You know, they won the game yesterday, but they were poor for much of it. And you look at their form, the Champions League, they don't look at Man City's level. At the start of the season, I tip Liverpool, but I'm slightly on the wane now.
Yeah, okay. And the other one is the back page of the Irish Independent, red all over. So this is Emery effect on Gunners will have rivals looking over shoulders. This is really interesting, I think, and we haven't talked about this yet. This is Arsenal's 4-2 win against Spurs in the derby yesterday. So Arsenal are 1-0 up and cruising, and I'm looking at my Twitter feed and everyone's like, oh, this is a 1-0 spanking that Arsenal are handing out, and then disappear for 5 minutes and come back and it's like, oh, Arsenal have just Arsenaled.
Yeah.
They're 2-1 down. But then it turns out Emery has this team playing really well, and they've got a goal scorer. It's like 8 out of 9 shots Aubameyang has now scored with in a row. It was 8 in a row. It was 7 in a row, and then he missed a sitter and then scored again. And it's like, okay, well, that's the exact opposite of what it would have been under Arsene Wenger. So I think Arsenal might be the real deal, finally.
Yeah, they're not going to win the league, I would have thought, but they're not far off, and they've developed a kind of a winning mentality, maybe that they didn't have under Wenger. It was probably they were allowed to get away with too much interest as well. Obviously, one of the main talking points, Fan was actually, I think, arrested for a racist incident involving Aubameyang. But it's good to see that stuff has been done about that. But it was a fascinating, weekend in the Premier League. It has to be said. Yeah,
you can start believing in Arsenal again, which is a very new thing. Like, do you remember Marwan Shamak was like the future of Arsenal striking options?
Remember his hair?
And now it's Aubameyang. It's like, well, look at the difference. This is what happens when you spend 50 million quid on a striker.
Absolutely.
You get good again. A reminder this morning that we got 3 vouchers from Kildare Village worth €250 to give away this morning on OTB AM. To be with a chance of winning, just retweet this stream and leave us a comment on the weekend sport, and we'll get to those comments a little bit later on. But still looking for your suggestions for the top 5 things in Kildare. I'm making the case that Kildare Village is actually one of them.
Like, you want one of those vouchers?
Yeah, who knows? The day is young. Okay, so what have you got first in the newspapers?
So, what do we got here? This is the Herald. Weekend reach finals. McCarthy upbeat after Euro 2020 draw. Pickford's apology for goal blunder. I think that's nonsense. Why is he apologising? These things happen.
Yeah, just about Mick being positive. Like, if day one on the job, he's going to be positive, right?
He should be.
He was asked about changing the style of play and was like, it's not like I have a season, I have 5 days to do it. Is there a bit of a...
Yeah.
My time here is limited. I must be about my father's work.
Yeah, I have to go in 2 years for the saviour, But there is an element of that, isn't there? Like, there was a false pretense when he agreed to get this job, and then the goalpost changed a bit.
Well, I think he agreed to it and knew exactly what he was doing, but now he's going to start complaining about it.
It's kind of like... is it like the mother who agrees to give the baby away, and then the closer to get to the birth, it's like, oh no, I can't do this. This is my baby. Mick McCarthy won't have been compared to a pregnant woman before, but
or refusing to put his baby up for adoption.
But Swiss, please. It's not a bad analogy though. Let's go with that.
No, yeah, okay,
Stephen Kenny's taken over a baby for adoption now.
Stephen Kenny gave an interview at the weekend where he talked about being adopted himself and trying to find the reasons for why that happened. So, like, there's a layer of depth to Stephen Kenny, which will start to emerge in public.
Definitely,
I think is going to be.
He does have to wait in the wings though a bit, doesn't he? He can't become too prominent, I think, until he's not manager. Until 2 years.
At the same time, I don't think Stephen Kenny can have enough prominence in Irish football over the next while. It's clear he has a vision and a passion for it, and is a product of our football environment that we should be like getting behind.
Yeah, but he's not manager until 2020, so I think Mick deserves to be in the helm, and we deserve to kind of back him. And Mick will do a good job. I think I'm feeling he probably will get us qualified, and I think he'll unite the country, albeit inheriting a mess from what he's taken over. Swiss, please, from Mick. Obviously, this goes back to, I think, his last game competitive charge. We lost Switzerland at home, and he made the point that we'd actually a very good home record under him. And Mick, that he shouldn't be remembered, I suppose, for that particular campaign, because we derailed a bit at the end. But Switzerland are, I have to say, a team I always hated Ireland playing. I thought they were very cynical.
Well, we were always just a little bit too big for our boots against them. It's like, this is Switzerland, they're crap. Their league is crap. And then they would come and spank us, and we'd be like...
They're a bloody good side now. Pickford holds up his hands. I do like that, I have to say, because that's exactly what, got him in trouble in the first place. No Rice meeting. So Rice hasn't met Southgate since, but there are a couple of quotes. This is obviously in the Star, but there are a couple of quotes where he says, I've the contract stuff. I'm playing week in, week out in the Premier League. This is a lot to take on for a young guy. He said that himself.
Leave me alone.
Leave me alone. And it's like, I probably didn't need this kind of national debate going on as well. But it doesn't sound quite as hopeless as was the case.
I mean, this is just a very long death by 1,000 cuts.
I'm not sure.
This is a Paul Brady song.
Yeah, Paul Brady brought up as well.
Obafemi, on the other hand.
Obafemi? Like,
you cap him, you lock him into you basically, somebody said it was extraordinary rendition at the time. I don't think it was.
He was really good though. And
now we have a top class. One game, 160 minutes.
He's a young kid that they say, he's a lot of pace and all that. He's very strong, but he didn't score. But it wasn't. That was what was so encouraging. It was just his general play now.
Against Man United on Saturday, he started for Southampton.
Against Man United is one thing. Like, against this Man United is slightly different in that they really were a shambles on Saturday. The midfield, Pogba was a disgrace for much of the game. He gave the ball away like a recalcitrant child again. And again, Fellaini was so poor. They created next to nothing. When they were gifted almost 2 goals to come back, they should have been able to take the game by the mantle and just win. And they barely created a chance second half. But Obafemi, this was the most positive development for Irish football this weekend, because he was very promising, I have to say, for a kid making his debut. Thrown in at the deep end, like a game in which if they lose, the manager possibly potentially could be gone.
Totally.
And he took it on. And Southampton, in fairness, were very good. But Obafemi, it's all about, it's like if you look at a horse, like you were talking about Samco, what Samco could achieve, like when he gets older, and it was all about potential. Obafemi is just starting off, and he really did look like a player. He really did.
Would you stick him straight in the Ireland team?
I'd certainly. He's probably a big.
First game's going to be a competitive game. Like, you want Gibraltar away. Stick him in for that, do you?
Well, what are our options? It's like, I think
Shane Long.
Like Shane Long. I mean, we don't have goal scorers at the minute. I'd definitely have him around the fringes of the team and see how he gets on in training. Gibraltar wouldn't be a bad place to start, because we should be beating them, obviously. The Race Post Derby Day delight. Origi's goal keeps Reds on City's trail, which I think if Man City would have been practically like 1-10 if they won yesterday, nobody would be going against them. But
on the front of that, they've got a picture of Apple's Jade,
Yes. Prize Apple, she was absolutely brilliant. Won a grade 1 by 20 lengths on good ground at Ferryhouse yesterday. She got by far the biggest cheer of the day. I think because she's a mare, the public really identify with her. And
she wasn't mad odds on either. It was like, there was a bit of doubt in the build-up.
Yeah, and it looked a good field. She was taking on Super Sunday and all that, but
it wasn't close.
No, she absolutely demolished them, and the Ferryhouse crowd really took to her. And obviously it was an up and down weekend for Michael O'Leary, because the bubble with Samco burst as well. Finally, I think we've the mirror here. Revenge. So it's all about McCarthy owes the Swiss one and the Danes. We all know that the lads will relish another chance to right all the wrongs. And outrageous, amazing day. And Klopp sympathises. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to run all over the pitch. Jose Pogba is a virus. If
Mourinho did that, we'd all be going, look at this narcissist. Klopp does it as like, oh, that's cute.
I tend to agree with you on that. I don't think Klopp is quite as nice, like as people. He's like, oh, he's a smiling German with the lovely glasses. Like, there's more to him than that. Jose Pogba is a virus. Jose Mourinho branded Paul Pogba a virus, poisoning the Man United dressing room in a furious dressing room row.
Wow.
I'm not sure when that took place, but
it could have been before the game, after a different game.
You'd probably just have to buy the paper to actually find out when he said
If only you had it right there and could read it to us.
I got up very early this morning, but I didn't have time. But Pogba,
played like a virus. I think the first 5 minutes he gave the ball away like 4 or 5 times straight away, and I was watching the game. As I said, I'd backed Man United because I thought Southampton were so bad, and I was like, this is not good. I'm already worried. Like, this lad is not on his game today, and he just does it too often.
Odds on favourites away from home is the fastest way to the poorhouse.
They were actually odds against. That was the point. Yeah,
right,
I thought they were good odds, and I thought at half time.
Turned out they weren't.
Yeah, anyway. Live to fight another day.
A reminder, of course, that we're here this morning in Kildare Village. This broadcast is brought to you with thanks to Kildare Village, where there's something extraordinary every day. We're live this morning in the Under Armour store to celebrate their men's offering in the village this Christmas, and we do have a bunch of €250 vouchers courtesy of Kildare Village to give away. To be in with a chance to win those, all you need to do is retweet this stream or leave a comment for us. You can hit us up on Twitter at Off The Ball or Facebook.com/Off The Ball, YouTube.com/Off The Ball as well. Andy Dunne and Alan Quinlan are going to join us in just a moment. But first, here's Kevin Kilban speaking to Nathan about the Euro 2020 draw.
So, Kev, the draw was made earlier today in Dublin for Euro 2020. The Republic of Ireland back in with Denmark, Switzerland, Georgia, Gibraltar. Your initial thoughts on it?
Well, Denmark again, Georgia again. We always seem to get Georgia, don't we? That's the thing. Look, I wouldn't want to sit here and go, yeah, it's a great draw for us. But we have to be realistic and say, if we'd have taken anyone out the top sides, Switzerland would have been one of those sides. I know they're a very good side, and they did beat Belgium 5-2 in their last outing. They've got very good players and difficult to play against. But I think out the top sides, we'd have taken them. Out the second tier sides, I think realistically we'd have taken Denmark. I know we're probably sick of playing against them, and they did give us a good stuffing in Dublin. But I think we're as good a side as Denmark if you take Christian Eriksen out of it. So that's not a problem to me. Georgia's a tricky one, don't get me wrong. And of course, well, we should definitely beat Gibraltar home and away. Famous last words, but hopefully that'll be the case. I think we've got enough. If we beat one of those top sides in Dublin, which I think we're capable of doing, both Switzerland and Denmark, I think we've got a good chance of qualifying, yeah.
And that is the key, and Mick McCarthy's aware of that. You need to win your 2 games against Georgia, win your 2 games against Gibraltar. But to qualify, you need to win one of those big matches against either Switzerland or Denmark. And I guess if you can't beat them in one of those 4 matches, you probably don't deserve to qualify.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. It is. Grind out decent results away from home. If you can get a couple of draws out there, which we're more than capable of doing against Switzerland and Denmark away. So I think do that, do your jobs right away from home. But at the Aviva, which is something we've been lacking at the Aviva in recent times, of getting a really good up-tempo performance, get outside. That's what I'm sure that Mick will be, the message that he'll be trying to get across to the players. Can we go out with a more positive mindset? And hopefully, and I do believe, I say hopefully, I think we can actually get results against those 2 sides at the Aviva, yeah.
Good stuff, Kev.
Good man.
All right, you're very welcome back to Kildare Village. A reminder, of course, that you can be with a chance of winning those €250 gift cards from Kildare Village. All you have to do is retweet the stream or leave a comment for us now. Andy and Alan are here, lads. You're both looking a bit dapper this morning.
Thanks, Shane.
Yeah, well, you've dressed up for us for a change, Andy.
Yeah, usually in my pyjamas.
There you go, especially on the joys of Skype. It's like, why are we only looking up there at you, Andy, this morning? It's like, yeah, well, how are you doing?
Good, thanks, yeah. Excellent.
Everybody's picking their Ireland squads at the moment for the World Cup. Gavin Cumsky is the latest one. There's some debate about the back row. I saw you'd picked one where Jordy Murphy was in ahead of Josh van der Fleer. I'm like, come on.
Well, you see, he covers 2 positions. I think we need a specialist cover at number 8. Van der Fleer and Dan Levy are, I suppose, specialist 7s.
Yeah.
You've Sean O'Brien obviously there as well.
Like Sean O'Brien not cover your 8?
Yeah, I suppose he does, but you know, you can only pick, I think, combinations. The numbers they pick per area matters as well. They're only going to pick about 5 or 6. I suspect they pick 5, 6 back rows max.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what I went for.
Surely you can't leave Josh van der Fleer out of...
Yeah, well, the way he played against the All Blacks, I think, and I picked the squad in September, and he wasn't in it. And it'll just tell you, you know, Levy and O'Brien were ahead of him. I was picking 2 7s, 2 8s, and 1 6, and then, you know, 3 second rows and Tyg Byrne possibly, or, you know, being that utility one, or Ian Henderson. So it's a very competitive area.
You hang on, you pick 1 6 because everybody
Sean
else
O'Brien
can
can play 6, Levy can play 6. It's probably easier position to fill. Andy's a good point about...
Is that like self-deprecating because you were 6? It's like anybody can play 6.
It's not, no. I think it's obviously being a 7. You can play 2 7s, you know, on a team. And we've seen Australia doing it very successfully with Hooper and Pocock. But it's a bit different when you're putting a 6 over as a 7. Now, Peter O'Mahony can go 7, and he has done that for Ireland and Munster before. but it's a little bit different. That 7 role is more specialist. You need someone really quick, and you want them targeting the breakdown and putting massive pressure on the opposition 10 as well. So there's so much talent there. When you think of the injuries that with Levy and with Levy and Sean O'Brien out, and Van der Fleer steps up, and then Jordy Murphy comes onto the bench. Any one of the 4 could start for Ireland, and you wouldn't have any complaints about them. So it's a very strong area for Ireland.
Yeah. Is it just me, Andy, or is the road to Japan basically starting this weekend? That after the November internationals are over and that focus on the All Blacks, everybody now is jockeying for position, because you've got to get some game time in the Six Nations, unless something remarkable happens. And if you don't get game time in the Six Nations, you ain't going to that World Cup.
Yeah, well, and you've got to get game time in the coming weekends in the European games to get into the Six Nations squad, and there's a level of competition within the provincial setups as well, given the kind of breadth of talent we've developed. Chris Farrell would be a prime example, who came back in after injury, 6-7 months out injured, started on Saturday for Munster, got 2 tries. He's 6'4", he can pass, he's an incredibly aggressive and physical runner, he's a great defender, and yet you're looking at who are the 3 guys ahead of him in Henshaw, Ringrose and Aki, and a guy like Chris Farrell's road to Japan is started last Saturday, and he's going to be so hungry to prove what he can do.
Joe Schmidt loves him. We shouldn't that's
but any coach would, Jerry, because as Andy said, he can pass. His hands are really good. He's big, strong. He's quick. So his all-round game is very, very, very good. I think that sharpness and that match practice is really important. The guys ahead of him are obviously performing very well. Henshaw's is a real mainstay in the team for the last number of years. And
last November,
Ringrose has been super, and Aki.
Last November, Rassie Rasmus was at a thing, and he made the prediction that when the World Cup quarter-final rolls round, Chris Farrell will be starting. And that was a very interesting kind of prediction from him, given that he's probably going to be coaching the team against them. So he obviously has huge faith in him.
Yeah, I think I remember when Munster were linked with him, and he was in Grenoble, and I spoke to Mike Prendergast a number of occasions, and he kept raving about how good this guy's passing was as well. And the path and the journey he had to go when he left Ulster and he went to France was a brave decision. He's still very young, and he's 6'4". He's the size of a good sized back row, very, very powerful. And but I think he's very humble and quiet guy, and doesn't get ahead of himself. So he knows that the competition ahead of him. And I think Joe likes him. Any coach would like a guy who's naturally that big and strong and abrasive, and he'll certainly be in the mix. But they've got to try and play in the Six Nations, and that's where you grab the attention.
Yeah.
And
that's why these games are huge.
But also you have to do well, and it's a very valid point that Andy makes about Europe. They're the games that people remember, the standout games. You'll get a bit of a pass in some of the Pro 14 games if you weren't standing out. But in the big games, big players have to stand out, and I think consistency, it's very, very early. Somebody can have a little bit of off form and has performed well for Joe Schmidt before, and that doesn't mean they'll be ruled out if they're not playing really well now. But I think coming towards the back end of the season, you've got to be playing well. And if Munster get a good run, they might get a couple of more guys on. Leinster are the ones with the lion's share, and rightly so, of players in the squad. If Munster get a good run in Europe, if Ulster get a run in Europe, get out of their group, that kind of stuff, a big quarter-final win or something, you grab attention, somebody can put up their hand. I thought Will Addison, even with respect to the USA last week, he just looked really, really good, and his lines of running and communication, and just looks like a player that he's one that could force himself into the reckoning come Japan.
Are you prepared for a year of talk about the Rugby World Cup?
I'm actually getting into it now, yeah. Started dating a girl from Rathgar as well, so it's just logical now, Go. And do you know what's mad? Every time I go into town, I want to see the Man United game the other day, and it was very, very hard to... everyone had Leinster on. It was really struggling to get a TV that was watching it.
For the Man United Southampton game, this 2 weeks ago.
No, Man United Southampton, so the Leinster were playing at the same time, so you're expecting the Leinster
were playing Dragons.
Yeah, but there's nobody... it was even... 2 weeks prior to that, when the internationals were on, I think Chelsea were playing Spurs maybe, and it was very, very hard to find anywhere watching it. Like, Dublin is really becoming a rugby city at the moment, and so, you know, I just have to embrace this. But I actually, genuinely, watching the Ireland-New Zealand game, it was very hard not to get swept away by it. Like, it's great fun.
The only other contentious call that Gavin Cumsky has in his piece this morning is that he's put Andrew Conway in ahead of Will Addison, and actually ahead of Chris Farrell as well. So I think Conway is still a little bit underrated, and yet could actually be a matchday squad player. I think he's going to get ahead of Larmour ultimately in matchday squad when it comes around to the World Cup.
I disagree on that. Wholeheartedly.
Okay.
Yeah. I think Conway's got a lot of abilities, great footwork. He scored that try, which is probably going to now go down in history as one of the more famous Munster tries at the tail end of the Toulon game last year. However, when you look at the likes of Will Addison, when you look at Chris Farrell, when you look at Jordan Larmour, and all the things we spoke about with the back row forwards, Joe Schmidt can only pick 31 players, and he needs to cover as many eventualities and risks and cover himself for injury. Quinny went to a World Cup in 2003 and dislocated your shoulder didn't you, in that first game? Like, things can happen very, very quickly, and if you're not covered in terms of the depth of your squad, you're suddenly in trouble with 28 players. Now, Addison covers 4 positions in the back line.
The centre.
Centre, wing and fullback. Both centres, wing and fullback. Farrell covers probably both centres, wing, maybe less so fullback. Conway, in reality, at an international level, is a winger, and that's all.
Is he not a fullback? Can he not?
I think he's on. Well, I think he's going to look at him as a winger, potentially as a fullback. Obviously, he's played there, but in terms of covering 3 to 4 positions, multiple positions across the back line, if he goes with 3 scrum halves, if he goes with 3 10s, if he goes with 3 centres, he's probably going to go with 5 back 3 players, and those back 3 players need to cover pretty much every position.
When you go up around 26, 27, you're starting to just close out the squad. I think utility players will, the 50-50 calls will get the benefit of the doubt, you know. But I think we say Joe likes a player. We only know that from him selecting him in big games. He put Andrew Conway on the bench a couple of years ago against England. He came off the bench and he's had him involved for a while. He's been a little bit unlucky with a few injuries on occasions. He went to Australia, got injured after scoring that try in the second test in Melbourne. When Haled Petty hit him with his knees into the hip, and it was so unlucky for him, because I really thought it was a great opportunity for him to really kind of have that confidence playing in the Irish jersey. He's never got a massive run. He looked so sharp last week, and again in the weekend for Munster against the USA game and at the weekend. So maybe that ability to, he can cover wing and full back very well, and he's very good under the high ball. He's not the tallest guy in the world, but I think Will Addison, you know, it depends how he goes, and it depends how Ulster goes well, Andy, throughout the season. I think it's very early to be, you know, going in depth in it, because a lot can happen. But it's a good place that he's in, that he has a lot of guys who can. Look at Tyke Byrne, the way he can play back row, second row. Henderson can do the same. That's probably going to come against one of the back rowers. I went to the World Cup, the 03 one. I went in that role possibly of covering second row and back row as well. And it helped me to get in ahead of David
Wallace. Who were rivals for the 6 jersey?
Well, David Wallace was, Wally stayed at home. Simon Easterby and myself were kind of deemed as 6. Victor Costello and Axel were the 8s, and then Keith Leeson was the 7. So Wally kind of lost out, because I could have covered 7, which I played against Argentina as well as a 7, but also there was only 3 second rows there as well. So that's where I think, you know, Tyke Byrne could be a real option, and he could push someone out of that back row position, and the same way Addison could as well. But he's got to play well for Ulster as well, because I think Conway at the moment, I think first and foremost, he'll, rather than going too much into the flexibility or the ability to play in different positions, he'll try and factor guys in their own positions and how they're playing. And then, as I say, when you get up to 26, 27, you might be going, look, there's 2 guys here for one position. And we're assuming
everybody's fit at the moment.
And I think John Cooney,
it's a weird situation at the moment where there's.
But I think John Cooney could be that ability to cover a couple of positions might help John Cooney. Does he bring 3 scrum halves, 3 fly halves, or does he just bring 5 there? I don't think he's going to bring 6. We went to the last World Cup with only 2 scrum halves, but you're across the water, you can fly someone across quickly if somebody gets injured. John Cooney can place kick, and he could possibly slot in against a Russia or a Japan as a 10. You know, if you took a player off, he could do 20 minutes, half an hour there easily. So that might help him over, you know, Marmion or Luke McGrath, which is, it's a good place to be, and I think that's the key area.
There's a question about that, actually. Conor Lynchy wants to know, what does Luke McGrath need to do to make the World Cup squad? Heineken Cup winner, second fiddle to a very good Connacht player. I think Marmion obviously was brilliant in the November series, but played on that injury and needed surgery afterwards, and it's going to be right up against the Six Nations before he gets back. So it's going to work against him. Like, the last thing he's done is going to be very good in the mind of the selection committee when they sit down, / Joe Smith. And but he's not going to be fit again really until the start of the Six Nations. So it's very hard for him to get back in the squad.
I took a bit of grief online recently for comments about Marmion in the autumn internationals, and I have no anti-Connacht sentiment. I played for them was my response.
Well, that might be why you're against them.
No, but he. While every man, like to a man against New Zealand, was heroic, in terms of technically what he did with his box kicks, they weren't probably up to scratch. They were very shallow, and a lot of them were inaccurate and infield. And on another day, I think we could have been really sorely punished. We got away with it. And then you're down to, if his box kicking game isn't that strong or consistent, is his passing that much better or different to Luke McGrath? And then if it's close or par on that, you look at their running game and their contribution around the field, and in that case I think Luke McGrath probably edges it. Then if you talk about Schmidt going with 3 scrum halves and 3 10s, if he does that, because he didn't do it for the last World Cup, we need cover as place kickers as well. If Sexton was to get an injury, if Cooney would only be involved if Murray was injured, but Murray is also a backup kicker, so you have to consider combinations, permutations. I actually think a year out, it's not outlandish to suggest he would go with Conor Murray, Luke McGrath, and actually Cooney as a third backup.
That's exactly what Comiskey had in his selection today. Neil Keegan, sorry, this one here. Yeah, back row isn't an easy pick. 2 specialists, and the other 2 perceived fringe players can cover 7 and 8. It's not a bad position to be in, but let's win the Six Nations before we pick Rugby World Cup squads.
What is the Six Nations? That's what intrigues me now. Is it almost like the league in Gaelic games, where the championship is the World Cup and the Six Nations this year is the league? 1 year
out of 4, I think it feels a little bit like that. Because like, if you win the Grand Slam and don't get out of your group, who cares about that Grand Slam?
Yeah.
You get like, there'll be a short celebration after. I don't know. You played and tried to win Grand Slams for your entire career, so maybe you feel differently about it.
It's a little bit different, but I think the Six Nations, you know, as a player going into Six Nations, you still have that feeling that you're playing for an opportunity every time, even the fellas on the team. So I don't think they'll drop their standards. I think we as the public and maybe in the media will probably go, look, we are bothered, but not as bothered as normal years. I think for this team to you know, they're positioned well to challenge for another Grand Slam. You think they've England at home first up. They're away in Scotland then the week after, which is a very daunting task, and I think the Scots will be rubbing their hands together for that one.
We owe them from the last time.
Well, we saw what happened there 2 years ago and stuff like that. So
they made our bus be late, and
they've got to manoeuvre their way. They got to manoeuvre their way through the Six Nations. And does he rotate the squad a little bit? I think he has an ability now to make some changes within the group, which is really important. I don't think he'll devalue it in any way, Joe Schmidt, because, you know, if they win another Grand Slam or win a championship, it's very hard to win a Grand Slam, and history has shown us that for any team. We don't really, you know, it's hard to back it up. So I think to be challenging for a championship, going to Cardiff in the last weekend will be a good place. If they lose a game, is it the worst thing in the world? I don't think it is. It might recalibrate them, if you like. But the other side of it then is, if they do continue winning is a real kind of culture, and it's a real part of mentality. And I think this group now a lot of them have won and lost together a lot over the years. And I think they're very, very mature. They'll realise that, look, winning a Grand Slam, but you can't look too far ahead. They've got to look at just the English game. And all those guys, their focus will solely be on Leinster, Ulster, Connacht, Munster this weekend.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it is a little bit different. There's no doubt about it. But you saw what England did in 2003 when they won the Grand Slam. They beat us in Dublin 46-45 43-6
and
or something.
they rolled that on into the World Cup.
We were challenging for, it was a Grand Slam decider, and then they continued it on to tour in
you are
New Zealand.
Johnny come lately, literally, as a rugby fan. What do you think about obviously we're a couple of months away, so it's hard to predict how you're going to feel about the Six Nations, but as a fan, when Ireland are playing England in the Aviva, I think it's a 5 o'clock kickoff, is it the first one? Yeah. When the anthem goes, how are you going to feel about that?
When I was a kid, I loved the Five Nations as it was back then, and even from I'm from the west of Ireland, rugby wasn't really strong. Craig's rugby club would be quite near me, but rugby was not strong at all. But because you had probably 2 channels, 4 channels in those days, there wasn't that much sport on TV, and we really used to get up for it. But I actually will probably get back more into it now, because I've met Joe Schmidt as well, and he's such an impressive guy. You're like, this is quite special, and obviously with the football team being at the lowest ebb ever, the rugby team possibly being as good as it's ever been, it does kind of bring you along on the ride, and it would be great to see them win a World Cup. And I was amazed looking at the odds at the weekend. France are 20-1 to win the Six Nations, and I haven't been following rugby that much. I was like, how have France regressed to the stage that the perennial powerhouse are I think it's an
overreaction to the fact that Fiji just beat them.
Yeah, in France.
Yeah.
But it was just amazing. So Ireland are actually odds-on favourites to win the Six Nations, but Wales are Wales look to be the value because they have Ireland at home, and I think Wales have a good chance, I would say, win the Grand Slam, because it'll probably hinge on that Ireland game potentially, at the very least, if England at home as well.
I think Wales are a team who traditionally have peaked for World Cups and have been planning for a World Cup, and it's Gatland's last stand, and he knows exactly what's happening. They've been blooding players over the last 18 months, just horsing players into the team, giving them opportunity, and they're going to have 60 players to pick from. We're picking the World Cup squad, and there's a few little bits here. I'd say the Welsh would be picking who have at it, lads. Who's going well?
Well, Gatland was the first guy to introduce what the sports scientists call periodisation into managing his teams, and we would have played against Gatland's Wasps teams from 01 to 04 when they're at their peak. Now, when you played them in October and you might have scraped a win, and you're a bit bruised and battered, if you came to play them again in April or May when there was a championship at stake or there was medals on the line, you took an unmerciful hiding, because what he was doing was he was introducing rest periods for players. He was taking guys out of his squad, he was rotating, he was giving guys weeks off in the middle of competitive seasons, and it's something that I suppose he's honed for years and years and years. And just as you mentioned, it's no accident, I think, that Wales simultaneously under his tenure have peaked at World Cups, have gone under the radar in between World Cups. And if you look at their autumn series on their 2017-2018 run, they've beaten South Africa, they've beaten Australia for the first time in years, they've developed strength and depth in their squad. I don't think they have as many, they're not as deep across the board as the Irish provinces are, but they still have a core 25-26 guys who could do some serious damage next November.
I think everyone plans to peak at a World Cup, though. That's the optimum goal. And if you lose and don't make the knockout stages or whatever, it goes wrong, naturally people say, well, there's something wrong, you failed, you overtrained, you won the Six Nations, you did well here and you didn't do well here.
And these are just the teams you played on.
Yeah. Well, look, 03 was, I think there was a bounce of a ball in that game against Australia in 03 when David Humphreys, the drop goal was nearly over, and we would have played Scotland in the quarterfinals. France, a very good French team who possibly could have gone further in the semi-final and beaten Australia. Was it was a bounce of a ball in that. 07, I think, was well documented. We probably overtrained a little bit physically and against each other in training, and didn't probably play enough of games, enough of match practice going into that one. 2011, I thought we all got carried away a little bit, but that was a very good Welsh side after beating Australia in Eden Park, and it was a very good Irish side. Wales and Gatland is shrewd like that. He figured out a game plan just to chop tackle the Irish players, get them off their feet and put pressure on O'Gara, who started that game, and slow Ireland's game down. So the disappointment of the World Cups is there for everyone to see.
It's weird that this is stitched into our history. This is the thing that... So we are starting the road to Japan here, basically, by being obsessed with our own failures.
Does it matter that it's in Japan as well? Because I remember, when the World Cup was on in the football there, it was the Japanese
referees...
not even just where you're actually playing in terms of geography. So the record of, like, we'll say the South American teams and all those teams in Europe is absolutely atrocious.
Yeah.
Like, so it was kind of like there was this. I remember thinking at the start, this could possibly just narrow down to European teams. So I'm wondering, how much of a negative is it for the likes of Ireland to be playing somewhere as far flung as that?
I think it's probably going to suit us because Joe is so renowned for his attention to detail and being calculated and cold and scientific. And when you go to a place like Japan where the atmosphere is going to be diluted and you're not going to have, there's not going to be a ton more Welsh, French, English, Scottish, or Australian fans than there is Irish. It's probably ultimately going to be a good atmosphere, but a neutral atmosphere. And in that case, the clinical side of Joe and what he's brought into his group and the way they think. Andrew Conway did a interesting, if not scary, interview recently where he said, Joe is such a good coach, you're always being watched, even in the hotel. And, it sounded a little like Big Brother. But,
there was a story one time about like a dropped key card. A key card was found in Carton House that has, it may or may not be apocryphal, but they're in Carton House. Joe's walking along the corridor, finds a key card, brings it up at the meeting and goes, this is not the level of attention to detail that I expect from people.
Apparently that's true, yeah.
I think it's very high profile.
Find high key cards everywhere, baggy tracksuit and stuff. But I think being away is a good thing. Being further away, I found that being in France and there was a lot of people around and a little bit, as opposed to Australia, it was different. We stayed in Terrigal for the first part of that World Cup in 2003, and it was about an hour and a half, 2 hours outside of Sydney, and it was great because it was just, you had a lot of quietness. There was nobody around really, and France was different. The UK was different probably in 15 for the Irish players, because if they go out anywhere, they're kind of recognised. There's loads of people around, so less distraction. So
how many Irish will go over it?
I'd say there'll be a lot. Look, they'll just,
Queenie's gone.
Probably won't be at the same level. Australia or New Zealand was different in 2011 because so many people who were travelling for a year kind of took in the fact that the World Cup was going to be on there. There was so many camper vans around, so many students. It was brilliant, the atmosphere. And I remember after we beat Australia in Eden Park, we went down into the square afterwards in Auckland, and it was incredible. There was thousands of Irish there. Loads of them came from Australia who were living there as well, so that was a bit different. I think you'll get a fair few from Australia. He'll go up to Japan, and it's probably not the cheapest place in the world to go.
No, but it is like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Yeah, it is. It's a different thing, and there seems to be a lot of going on the tour groups that I've heard of, and so I'd say there'll be a fair few there. The Irish make their way everywhere.
Yeah.
A couple of quick more texts for you, and then so I was naming my top 5 Kildare things earlier on. Top 5 things in Kildare: Mr. Joe O'D, Kildare Village, Whitewater Shopping Centre, Punchestown, the Curragh, and the Japanese Gardens. Gift cards, please. I think you've named a rival there, buddy. You can't get it. Jerry says Kildare top 5 sports people for you this morning, lads: Larry Tompkins, Shawnee Johnson, Mick O'Dwyer, etc., etc., etc. Larry Tompkins is actually a Kildare person. To
Carlo O'Dwyer as well.
Yeah.
Bringing us back to 1998.
Carl's part of the certainly was part of the under-21 setup last year, so I don't know if he is again this year. I think any list that doesn't include Niall Buckley in this is not going to win today, so best of luck for that one. Paul Canan has retweeted the Off the Ball stream and says, loving the show, lads. Best thing about Kildare has to be Kildare Village. # Kildare Village. That's where we are this morning. So
give that man the prize.
Well, we'll see. We'll let the producers decide on that one.
The organisers can win the prize as well. It has happened before.
Okay, this one for you, Johnny. Sorry, but we'll get back to the World Cup chat in a minute. Where to now with Undressed? You better explain that, given that we've been dressed today. What's going on? Undressed is the name of your horse?
Yeah, he ran yesterday.
Jimmy Murphy wants to know this.
I think he might run in Limerick at Christmas in a veterans race. So veterans race is open to horses rated age 10 years or upwards, and he just qualifies because he's 10. So Willie was talking about like these big handicaps he could run in, but I don't think so. Basically owning the horse
Are you second guessing Willie Mullins live on OTB AM this morning?
Well, basically the horse I bought like 10 years ago, he could qualify for all of these big races, but because it's so competitive now in Jigginstown, and mainly Jigginstown have so many runners, so Jigginstown could have like 12 runners in the Paddy Power Christmas. Basically the standard has just gone up. So like the likes of Undress, he's not going to get into them races anymore. He's just not good enough, basically. So I think he'll probably end up running a more modest company at Limerick at Christmas. But it was a great day at Fairyhouse yesterday.
Yeah, so you are telling Willie Mullins you know better than him. That's basically what I'm hearing.
I'm just telling him that I think you're wrong, Willie. But hopefully he might go to Limerick at Christmas. Hopefully he's alive this morning anyway. That'll be a start.
Yeah, okay. And this one here from Frank Carr says King Henry making giant steps to replace the irreplaceable Brian Cody, #Ballyhale. So Ballyhale.
Well, that's interesting as well, because like that game was being billed as something of it wasn't a formality, and they absolutely demolished them. Now they've good hurlers, but it just looks, we're talking about, there's been so many successions in Irish sport lately with the football and obviously Farrell as well, but that now is going to be seen as like he's getting the job after Cody eventually. But Cody is not going to be in any rush to give that job up. I genuinely think he won't be rushing.
It looked like it was going to be the impossible job to follow, but actually they've come off their peak so much that there's a sense that, well, maybe now might not be the worst time to get in there.
It's not the equivalent of like Ferguson and Cody. Obviously Alex Ferguson being compared to Cody a lot. It's not the same as taking over Man United. Like Kilkenny are miles off winning All Ireland at the moment.
There was one thing that I wanted to bring up in the context of next year's Six Nations. If the Ireland fans are all a bit like, it's only another Six Nations title or whatever, it would remind me a little bit of Kilkenny hammering Waterford that time to win the 4 in a row. They didn't stick around, the Kilkenny fans didn't stick around to watch the team parade. They all went home because they were so used to it at that point. But that was the greatest performance that team ever had. They had no wides until the 67th minute. They annihilated what was a reasonable Waterford team, who granted kind of choked on the day. But notwithstanding that, you have to celebrate your victories. You can't blah 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 away. It's just another Six Nations. So Irish rugby needs to wake itself up.
Yeah,
and go, this is Joe Schmidt's last Six Nations.
And I'll be watching with bated breath for the English game. I wrote a piece a few years ago about the party atmosphere, and I don't know if you remember it, where people were out having drinks at half time, and I couldn't believe it because I was doing commentary, and I went out to the loo, and I kind of was sprinting back, and then I saw all these people having a few drinks
as the second half kicked off.
Yeah, and I didn't know the second half had kicked off, so I was kind of racing back, and then I saw all these people, and I started walking. I said, sure, the match is not back on yet. And to my horror, Ronan O'Gara was about lining up a shot at goal to go 3 points ahead of England in the second half. And all these people, hundreds of them, under the stand were sitting there having drinks. They weren't even looking up at the monitors as the game started. You'd say something if they were staying there looking up at the monitors. So I was shocked because I just thought, geez, it's England. It's all the history between the teams. Where's the energy? Where's the atmosphere? And I remember I came up from Cork that morning really early, and I woke up that morning with a bit of excitement. I wasn't a player anymore, but it was Ireland, England.
Yeah.
And it was a bit diluted, and some people agreed with me. Some people said, well, we're entitled to have our drinks, but it was gone a bit corporate-y, at the game.
Definitely.
But I just thought of all the games, and that's understandable, the corporate side of running a stadium and stuff like that, and people want a day out, but it frustrated me that day, and I just think the Ireland-England game will focus the minds. It's a great start to the Six Nations. Ireland have 2 massive games, England and then go to Murrayfield. They're 2 exciting ones. So I think that will certainly kind of energise people and hopefully get a good start with that English game.
Andy, I haven't spoken to you yet about the succession and the coaching ticket yet, so we know who the next head coach is going to be. We don't know what his backroom team is going to be. Greg Feek is obviously moving on, I think, to Japan after the World Cup. How important is it that we have somebody who is his natural successor on the coaching ticket, or is it important at all?
No, I think we need to be realists about it. I think when Joe, I've heard concerns that Farrell hasn't been a head coach. Joe Schmidt was an assistant coach for 7 years to Vern Cotter in Claremont before he got given the Leinster job. So somebody took a chance and a leap of faith on Joe being a head coach. And I think he lost his first 4 professional games as a head coach for Leinster. And visionaries like George Hook were calling for his head, and he was
like the worst coach ever.
He was one of the worst appointments of all time. So it goes to show what a bit of patience does. I suppose in that regard, Farrell is a different personality to Joe. He's a different character. He seems to be more emotional. He's got a physical presence about him, and he impresses that upon the group. As a defensive coach and his own background in sport at a high level. So there's lots of differentiating factors between him and Joe as a person. So I think he needs to be given and afforded time to be his own person. It's the same will happen when O'Gara retired and Sexton came in. He's different. When Sexton retires and maybe Carberry takes over, he's different, and he needs to be given time to bed in and express his own strengths and skills, and one size doesn't fit all, and there's only one Joe Schmidt. When Farrell takes over, he's a different animal altogether, and hopefully we can be patient with that and give him the respect he deserves to start off and a bit of time.
Who should be in the backroom team? He's pushing hard for Raj.
If I mention his name anymore, I'm going to have to get a cut out of the contract if he gets it. Take some commission. But
what do you think of that?
I think it's a really good idea.
Stuart Lancaster is the other one. But
I think where Raj, the difference obviously with Raj, he's down in New Zealand. He's been in France, and most likely he would love that job. I think Lancaster has been an England head coach. I don't know what he'd like to be an assistant at an international level.
It's hard to know, isn't
and
it?
I don't know if Leinster Leinster may be extremely reluctant to let him go, whereas Canterbury would probably give Ronan.
Well, Rogers finished in next August anyway. As it stands, he's there for another year. But I think the interesting one is Leinster won't want to lose Stuart Lancaster. But he's been linked with so many jobs. Leinster play Bath away on Saturday in the Heineken Cup, and Bath are strongly trying to get Stuart Lancaster, and he's commuting over and back. Would it suit him better? We'd be speculating on what's going on, what he's thinking himself. I think he loves it in Leinster.
Yeah,
he loves the culture there. Why wouldn't you want to stay with a team like Leinster? I wouldn't say he will go to another club. I'd say if he's going anywhere, he'll either, he'll go to international rugby somewhere, and I think he'll be very much in demand. But he has to be mindful of Leinster have reinvigorated him and reignited his career with the success that they've had in the last couple of years.
I think he is. I think he's a very astute guy, and he got dragged through the mud in public by his own country, and as they only can do over there. They were destructive and they were just completely and entirely unfair towards him. For a guy who'd masterminded a hammering of the All Blacks a year before their World Cup, he got one or two things potentially wrong, but the team didn't perform, and he was dragged through the mud. And I think he did speak about taking the Leinster job. He had an interview with Joe Malloy on News Talk, and he spoke to Wayne Bennett, who's a legendary rugby league coach, and Wayne Bennett's advice to Lancaster was, whatever your next job is, make sure you 100% want the job and they 100% want you, and unless that's a good fit, he goes, don't take it, because your career will get destroyed, because you're already coming from a pretty dark place.
So and England made a mistake. You look at Graham Henry in the 2007 World Cup when New Zealand were beaten by France. There was calls for his head, and a lot of the public in New Zealand wanted him out because that was seen as massive failure, losing that game. And then they
choked again.
They reinstated him, and they won in 2011. And
do Farrell and Lancaster have any relationship then?
They do. I'm sure they get on.
Farrell was Lancaster's assistant when Lancaster was head coach for England at the last World Cup. So they would they've worked with each other. They know each other well. But as far as
roles reversed, if it happens,
But that would be an interesting dynamic then for him. Could I go in there as a second, Well,
one of his things in Leinster is he seems very much without ego. For a guy who coached England as a head coach, he was being brought in as Leo Cullen as the final say, and he's been his assistant, and he said no issue with that, and he's never made a power play for the top job, and he's got on with his work and done it brilliantly. And insofar as being linked with Bath, I think he would be crazy. And Bath rugby is, I heard recently described as Downton Abbey. They're locked away in this country house, literally away from the city in Bath, a huge kind of palatial country home where they train, and they've got pitches, and they're plagued by infighting. They're not a club anywhere near Leinster in terms of their academy setups, their consistency, their recent success.
One job that might be of interest, which isn't available at the moment, but which could be available in the next couple of weeks, is the Australia job for the World Cup. It might be a terrible job, it might also be an amazing job for a year to do.
International rugby is where most 99% of coaches want to be, I think, particularly if you've had a taste of it. I remember having a chat with Clive Woodward It was something along the lines of, we were talking about speculation, different coaches one year, and he said, you know, if you have that ambition, international rugby is where you have to go if you want to get to the top. And I think I would be very surprised if Stuart Lancaster didn't want to coach internationally again. It's different than the club scene. He's had less pressure coaching in Leinster now because he's not running the whole environment like Leo Cullen's the head man, and he's out in the field coaching, running the sessions, and he's probably enjoying that. But any job internationally in the top nations that comes up would interest any coaches, I think. Including O'Gara, I think any of them who are out there, they would want to try and have a crack at international coaching.
You mentioned him again there. You're definitely getting a cut of the contract.
Well, can you name anybody else?
No, it's fair. No, I'd agree.
Genuinely, I'm saying, because I said this to you the other day, Gerard.
I don't know
who
what
else is in the running to be Andy Farrell's assistant, unless he pulls someone out of English rugby.
But what does Mike Prendergast do? What's his job?
Well, Mike Prendergast, he's with Stade Francais, and he's doing really well, and he's probably someone that, you know, could he go into that job straight away? From a skills point of view, what would count against him is probably the status and you know, his playing career.
Yeah,
he hasn't played for Ireland.
That shouldn't count.
But
really,
you know, his attack with Oyonnax last year was getting unbelievable compliments in France. He was struggling with a very small budget in France, but they were scoring 35 points every game against all the top teams. And he's with Stade Francais now, and Paul and Heineke Meyer. So you know, Mike has, you know, been in France for a number of years. Unfortunately for him, I don't think he would. He's not getting mentioned because he's not high profile enough.
But I'm sure the RFU are doing, and I'm
yeah,
sure
but I think
Andy Farrell
for Mike
is doing.
To come back, and I think it'd be brilliant to see him come back in a few years, because he's doing an incredible job, and the experience he's getting in France is to go with a Munster, a Leinster, a Connacht, or an Ulster, and actually be a backs coach or a skills coach or get some sort of a role there. He probably has to go a roundabout way to get to the top level international, and which is unfair sometimes. It's all down to perception. But I think what he's done in France certainly shouldn't go unnoticed. And you know, I think he's very, very well thought of over in France there for what he did with that. Not just with an Oyonnax, but with Grenoble as well. And you know yourself, Andy, if the French rugby is the budgets that some of the top ones have, it's very hard to compete with that. And it's kind of like the Premiership in England. There's two tables and one table, if you like.
Yeah, it's hard for Ireland to develop new coaches when we only have the 4 provinces here. So you've got to send people out around the world and hope that
Gervin Dempsey's gone to Bath as well. So it'll be interesting to see how Gervin gets on there for the next couple of years. There's a lot of other good coaches abroad as well.
A quick last one on this. Any thoughts on Neil Madigan's performance on the weekend? Can he have a future with Ireland? Asks Alan McGee. Pat Lamb's Bristol hammered Leicester. Obviously, Jordan Murphy not getting linked with any of these jobs either at the moment, is the head coach at Leicester. Madigan is off the table from an Ireland perspective when he's playing in England, irrespective of how well he plays, or is there a point where he gets to like the peak of his career, has like an 18-month window where he's the outstanding out half playing in English rugby? Does everybody change their mind at that point?
Unless they have a policy shift, I don't see him getting back in, or unless he moves back to Ireland. I could see him actually moving back to Ireland very conceivably. I think I actually saw quite a bit of his performance. I thought he was outstanding, and he was outstanding for a season or two before he left as well. So he's ultimately in the Simon Zebo bracket now. He's made a choice. They only have ever made allowances for one player really, for Sexton when he went to Rosling, and they went on record to say that Joe said he was happy to make an allowance for one person, but I don't anticipate he's going to do it for anybody else.
Yeah, it's fair enough really. I suppose Sexton has just been the best player in the world, so if you're going to make an exception, it's like, we're only going to make it. Can you win the best player in the world? Yeah, okay, you can come into this club. That's it. A reminder, we're here in the Under Armour store all morning to celebrate their men's offering in the village this Christmas in Kildare Village. It is all with thanks to Kildare Village, where there's something extraordinary every day. You guys would have been playing over Christmas all your careers, right? Like, did the big Christmas Day, Stephen's Day, not Christmas Day, did that become a thing when you were playing pro?
No, I think luckily enough, I think there was with the rotation that you probably only play one. I didn't mind the Stephen's Day one, to be honest. It was probably, if you had the other one off, you had a couple of days. It was having a couple of days either before or after either game. It's different this year now. It's for the first time ever. The games are the way Christmas falls is Saturday, so they have Christmas Day and Stephen's Day and the day after. I'm sure there'll be some training going on, but it's a little bit more relaxed for them. I found it was a good distraction. It was part of your job. If you had to play the two, invariably you had one at home, and then the second one we were normally in Belfast around New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. So it was kind of it was better to play the home one if possible.
So you could go up to the away trip.
Yeah, well, if you didn't
and not play.
Well, if you played the home one, you could have a pint or something Stephen's night, or meet some friends, or go and relax and have some food, and you had a couple of days off. If you were playing the second one, you probably couldn't do that midweeks because they were close enough, 5 or 6 days between them. So I think it was something you just accept. And you know what? If you were off, you'd be probably complaining that I wish I was playing.
You didn't know
again.
any difference.
Yeah, we didn't know any difference.
We were in England. It was slightly different at the time. I was actually in Bath, and they were fond of a Christmas morning training session. So that was it wasn't the best crack, to be honest.
But they open the pubs on Christmas Day in England.
True. So
they play. I think the NFL play on Christmas Day. I think in America, and like
the NBA do anyway.
Yeah, and like I'm obviously a racing journalist, so my Christmas is basically I'm back on the 26th early for 4 days of Leopardstown. But like you're kind of there, and you're like, this is like the best racing ever, and so the lads are playing rugby. Like you could be doing a lot worse things. Like I know you're not getting a week or two off, but it's like Christmas is it is what it is.
There is a significant difference between being a journalist who can go for a few pints after work and
journaling often, But at the same time, you're playing professional rugby. It's not the worst.
It's tricky though, because you would be a little bit envious, Johnny, as a player. Kind of, it's not even to go and have the pints and the wine and the drink or anything like
Christmas
that.
Dinner is
it's just to be able to switch off and be at home.
But imagine being a jockey where on Christmas Day, for a lot of jockeys, they're not even able to eat anything.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? So there's that as well.
The Christmas dinner for jockeys doesn't sound like much fun.
No.
But could you have, when you were playing in England, would you fly back to Ireland and fly over Christmas evening? Or?
When I was in Harlequins, they didn't have a Christmas Day training policy. So for those 3 years or so, I used to fly back to Dublin, and then I'd be on the 6 a.m. Stephen's Day playing. But that wouldn't be the best preparation. I think we played Gloucester in Kingsholm, and I felt a bit groggy going out onto the field, having been up at about quarter to 5 or something like that. So
how did you play?
I think we drew. I think I was hauled off after about 60 minutes.
Okay. Not great.
So not great.
And would you be watching your diet around Christmas? I
think.
Yeah, you have to. I think if you get the game, it's probably if you play the Stephen's Day game, then you can maybe relax the next day and have, not be as stringent on the diet for a day or two. But invariably you'd be going out for a run or doing some form of
And do your family not
training.
go, come on, just forget about it, it's all right, just this one? Or is it like
once you're balanced, but you've got to bear in mind, you've got aggressive little strength and conditioning coaches coming in with monitors and tags and GPS and
you try
body
and have a
fat
Christmas
monitors
party as well. You have to have some sort of a get-together before, maybe after, historically for us, and most teams, I think it happens after the second European back-to-back game, either that weekend or you pick some day during the week where you go out as a group. So
you're
probably
in a time with friendly guards, I understand.
Yeah, exactly. You're probably having a night, and one night there and maybe a few pints some other night. Some guys don't drink much, some guys it doesn't bother them in any way. I think it's a time of year that you can lose your focus and shape very quickly, and certainly with the professionalism as the years went on that I was playing, we started to understand that. So if you had a few beers or something, you'd probably end up doing a run or something the next day, a bit of a flush out of the system, and you'd still be watching the diet, because ultimately you can lose ground very quickly. There's big European games coming in January and then Six Nations and stuff.
Matt Williams famously brought in a policy in January with us in Leinster called DNFUJ, which was do not F up January, because what was happening was from the previous 3 seasons before Matt came in, guys seemed to have some kind of resentful switch off stroke hangover from not being allowed to enjoy Christmas, and kind of went hard at it for the first couple of weeks of January with 2 big European games to qualify out of our group at the end of January, and Leinster fell at that final hurdle 3 seasons in a row. So DNFUJ was kind of...
Did it work?
It did actually, yeah. He kind of burnt it into our brains. It was a daily mantra, because he went after guys, and he from team meetings and honesty sessions to who'd been out and who wouldn't plan to go out. He really drove it hard that year. That was around 02.
That Leinster setup must have been like a wild group in that were constantly on the piss.
Yes, there was. Well, I probably would have been part of it as a younger guy as well, unfortunately. But that, at a time when
you can't name names.
No, when I'll say I was, I'm okay talking about myself. But at a time when Munster and Quinny were really on the up, and Munster were bringing a couple of thousand people over to French games in Europe and winning away, and then getting that first win in, was it 06? In the European Cup, Leinster were very much going through a crisis of identity, and gradually it changed and it toughened up and it hardened up as an environment, and they've come out the other side. 10 years later, they're a force to be reckoned with.
You've said in the past about the relationship with Cheika not being particularly good and how hard he was. Did Leinster need that, or could there have been a different way of doing it?
Yeah, no, me personally and a few others wouldn't have. I wouldn't respect the way he operated with individuals, but as a...
In what regard, like?
Just a bit of a bully with individuals, and that's fine. And at times in professional sport that'll be glossed over. But he had a toughness that he brought to the group, and a lack of acceptance with mediocrity and all those things. So ultimately, I think it was the right choice. Leinster needed a kind of an iron fist. At some stage it needed to happen because they were weak, and there was a soft underbelly and there was a lot of talent, and everything that was thrown at them was fair because they never came through and won everything. So they needed a guy to rule with an iron fist. They needed a guy to come in and I suppose be unfair at times, and professional sports players have to just suck it up and get on with it at times. The proof of the pudding was that he won the first European Cup with Leinster, and you can't argue against that record.
Yeah, it was a pretty mad time though, right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was part of a group where we were working hard, just like any of the other players in the squad, but he would randomly type up names that weren't required for training and put it up on the inside window of the changing room. So you drove over from Blanchardstown for an hour to do your job and you were told to go home. So strange stuff like that. He would do it. He was trying to make a marker among the group, among players, and lay down a gauntlet and see how people reacted. But it was odd, but ultimately effective.
Yeah. Your toughness didn't come from Declan Kidney. It didn't come from the coaching staff. It obviously came from within.
Yeah, it was no secret ingredient. I think there was a good, ambitious group of players, and to be fair to Declan, like he deserves a lot of credit for moulding the group. When I started playing with Munster in '97, and one of the big things and important things he did with us was to get us to believe that we could achieve success, and then a lot of it was player driven. There was good ambition within the group to get fitter, to get stronger, and it was a unit. It was a bit different than any other club as such, because we were based in Cork and Limerick. We were kind of divided in the group, and we were training in both places, and we didn't really know any different. You're in the car one day going to Cork to train, they're coming up to Limerick the next day, and I was based in Limerick, but I suppose for me growing up there was a bit of a hard edge to Munster, and it was a bit kind of, you have to be tough, and it was a hard place to go and play, and teams didn't get it easy there.
And that was club rugby.
Yeah, club rugby as well, because when I started going to games, the AIL games in Shannon when I was younger, Jesus, Shannon Young Munsters, there'd be 12,000 people there, yeah. And they'd be beating the heads off each other like it was a tough place to play. Yeah, or Thomond Park in either one, or Garryowen, Shannon, Young Munsters, Garryowen.
Were Garryowen not a bit posh? Was that not the...
Yeah, that was the perception. They were kind of, very talented. Shannon and Munsters, Young Munsters, would be traditionally forward orientated, kick the ball a lot, kick everything in front of them as well. Garryowen probably were, that was the perception at times, that their back line would cut you apart, and they played more expansive rugby. But it was all tough rugby, and it was hard, and that kind of continued on to Munster, that kind of hard edge as well. But Declan was really good at moulding a group who was all new to us, Jerry. We hadn't a clue what professionalism was, so it took a number of years. And
did you guys have the drinking crowds that, so in retrospect, Leinster had it,
Not collectively, I don't think. I think we all came from different areas and were scattered around the place. I was going back to Tipperary, I might have a few drinks with my own mates there. We'd certainly have... after a game in Limerick on a Saturday, are we staying the night, or the Cork fellas going home? So it was a bit different. People were kind of going back a little bit. We tended to have a good few drinks and enjoy ourselves more if we were away games, because tended in the earlier years stay the Saturday night after a game and have a great night out there and come home groggy on the Sunday. But that changed as the years went on because, with professionalism, understanding, the alcohol, the recovery, all that kind of stuff. Nowadays, guys, it's the first thing they do is they're getting monitored by the doctor, the physio. There's a list going around the dressing room. Any sort of knocks, niggles that could potentially...
The thing is, they're doing it from like the time they're 14 and 15 because it's a lifestyle choice.
And it's a good way. Look, sometimes you think the bit of old school side of rugby, and Ireland beat New Zealand a few weeks ago. Those boys went out and probably had a great day on the Saturday night and maybe enjoyed themselves on the Sunday as well, and deservedly so. You have to pick your moments now as a professional. So that sometimes they'll have organised 4 or 5 matches, right, where we're staying overnight on one of the away trips, we're having a few beers, and it's good for the group as well. Some of the best memories I have are the nights out because you bond with guys. I remember when Doug Howlett came in 2008. We won the European Cup. He came in January, and I didn't really have a lot of time with Dougie. I had him training, and it's all very quick. And then we ended up going to Boston that year on a tour, and I remember we had a couple of nights out, and we ended up having chats and getting to know each other and the whole group. So sometimes a night out, you have to down tools and go, right, even if you're playing poorly, it does bring guys together a little bit.
Pat Dolan said that as well. I remember when he was managing Pats, said Pats were having a bad season, and I think they'd lost like maybe 2 or 3 games in a row, and he said, right, we're all going on the tear, and they had a massive team bonding. They got to know each other. The whole season went,
But it's not even Johnny going on a mad one.
It's just getting to know each other and having and laughing, like having a bit of fun,
paintballing or go-karting or some event where you go away, meal out together, and no distractions and stuff. That's part of team building, and you've got to have unity in a group as well. And going back to what you were saying about Michael Cheika and guys getting chopped and not training, it's tricky because if guys are not getting picked, they don't like the head coach. I was in that position a few times in my career where half the guys are all getting picked, thinks he's the best thing ever, and then the guys who are not getting picked hate him because they're in knocking on his door every week saying, why aren't I on the team? And he's telling them one thing, and then they see an example of what he said, if you do this, and they do it, and then he doesn't pick him again. And, so it's hard being a head coach. You've got to make ruthless decisions and cutthroat decisions at times.
We had one last question there for Johnny, which was about whether or not Apple's Jade might have a better chance of winning a champion hurdle than Sam Crow.
At the moment, you'd probably say she has. This is the problem with Cheltenham being diluted into a 4-day festival where they've mares only races, which I've gone on record before as saying the French were bringing in this jockey's allowance for female jockeys. I thought it was blatantly sexist. Over here now we've Rachel Blackmore top of the table. She doesn't need any allowance. She's doing it through talent. I think a lot of female jockeys get on better with particular horses than male jockeys for whatever reason. But in the equine kind of side of that, they've mares only races at Cheltenham, which are grand, but they're basically not particularly competitive, and they mean that Apple's Jade doesn't take on Bouverdere in a heavyweight clash, and a lot of people, because she's a mare, would want her to win, and there'd be a lot of hype around it. When Dawn Run arrested the decline of a nation really in terms of the recession in Ireland at the time by winning the Champion Hurdle and the Gold Cup, the fact that she was a mare was massive. It meant everything, and it's just disappointing now that that's been diluted because of the commercial imperatives of Cheltenham. I'd say it's more likely to become a 5-day festival than a 3-day festival, which it should be. Yeah. But to answer the question, she probably actually does at the moment, yeah.
The gift cards that we had to give away worth €250, we asked people to retweet or leave a comment. Our winners are John Mulpeter, Aisling Towie, and Ger Murphy. So congratulations, we'll be in touch with you all. That's pretty much all we have time for this morning on OTB AM. We've been in the Under Armour store here in Kildare Village. Where are you going shopping, lads? What do you
everywhere?
Invite the lads to work on Monday, and it's like I'm going straight to we're down in Kildare Village, lads. Oh yeah, suddenly I'm available for the whole day.
Whoever gives us the biggest discount, we go there, and we'll do loads of tweeting for them as well.
So we are here this morning with thanks to Kildare Village, where there is something extraordinary every day. I hope you've enjoyed the show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 7:45. The lads will be back on the radio tonight at News Talk at 7. Keep an eye on offtheball.com across the day for all the rest of your stuff. We'll see you tomorrow. Good luck.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.